Everyone on the bridge. Good morning. Can you hear me? Please put a plus sign. So I see, it's good. So, well, we moved on to the second chapter today. Of course, every text of this chapter, there are 70, somewhere 50 texts, somewhere 40. It requires a certain, one might even say not that classes, but even a module, because they are so deep. Let's say when Krishna says about John that we are not the body, that we are the soul, and happiness, and sorrow. It's also like winter and summer, they come and go. And each text has to be disclosed. But again, I have planned one chapter for one lesson. There are only 18 of them. Therefore, you are already reading. I will send you the text of this chapter after each lesson so that you can study it further. Because the amount of information is huge. It is huge and Bhagavad can be studied all your life. Therefore, I give this abbreviated version. Of course, I would like to devote more time to this, but so far. The second chapter is the essence of Bhagavad Gita. In general, they are all very deep chapters. And so the first text says that Sanjaya is a sage who had a spiritual vision. He could see from a distance what was happening on the battlefield of Kurukshetra. And he told King Dhritarashtra what was going on there. It's as simple as that for our world, it's like you turned on a video camera in Wi-Fi mode. And here you see what happens. And the sage had such a gift, Sanjay, that he could see what was happening there many kilometers away from this event. Well, the king asked me to tell. Well, Sanjaya says that when Krishna saw Arjuna's eyes full of tears with suffering and sorrow, that is, well, Arjuna, he uttered the words that it was like a great warrior. He's going to have a battle, and he says, I'm not going to fight. And here is the king, he tells everything. It's more like Sanjaya, he tells the blind king what he sees. Well, the king, of course, he rejoices, because this is the king. He is against Arjuna winning. And when Arjuna is already crying, well, he is a king, he wants the Pandavas, these righteous kings, to be defeated. Let me remind you again that Arjuna is a warrior. He loses himself, loses his composure. The battle is important. He sees relatives and friends in front of him. The whole situation shackles him. He does not want to harm even those who went against him. He froze, tears come to his eyes, and he is torn by a sense of duty, but at the same time, he is torn by compassion. Well, I have said in the past about this concept that Krishna does not condemn him, he does not reproach him, he just starts talking. It was just such a turning point in this event. And he didn't say anything. Arjuna spoke, and then Krishna started talking. And how it relates to us when we have some kind of internal conflict. We feel that it's time to somehow change something in our lives, make serious cardinal decisions, or even leave work. Or to tell the truth to someone out there, to tell the parents the truth. And we are afraid. We are afraid according to some fears, let's say we may have. We are afraid to seem, let's say, bad, not sincere people become. And it seems that we are stuck in something. And inside, a voice says that it is necessary. It is necessary, he says. That is, when we are faced with a choice, simply put, and the choice to become better, or to stay on the path we are on. That is, the choice in favor of development, and examples can be given a lot. There to become a vegetarian or not to become a vegetarian. To make spiritual progress, there to sing mantras or not to sing mantras. Work at a particular job that is, we cannot understand why we are not happy, because we do all our tin for ourselves. And here we are tired of working, we are tired. And Krishna immediately explains that the way you behave, it's not yours. That is, it is a weakness, it is not a virtue. In other words, Krishna assumes the role of a teacher. He asked him, "Let me be your disciple." He said it. He doesn't say Arjuna is bad. He says what's happening to you is not you. That is, it is a filth that has overshadowed your mind. And that's when we hide behind our indecision, under the guise of kindness, for example. Let's say I don't want to punish, say strict things to my children. I know parents who pat their children on the head, believe that this is the mode of goodness, that it is right. Well, I mean, they don't say strict things, and then bring up their child, so that she sits there on the phone, and does nothing. That is, the mother does not want to strain the child. There's a squirming snake in front of his child. And then she grows up to be such a queen, Petrique she is. Mom will command and everything else. In other words, Krishna is telling you directly here that this is not mercy, this is false compassion. That is, you are afraid, and you don't really love. Many people have the notion that dislike means punishment. That is, if you are being punished. My parents punished me, so they didn't love me. In other words, we need discipline. Well, in other words, you can give a lot of examples of how this situation applies to us. Because we are empty inside. At some point, we are unhappy, we do not understand, we are faced with a choice. This means that the Lord somehow works through us, he says. That is, Krishna, he calls Arjuna to wake up. He says, you are your fear. That is, remember who you are. So you're a warrior. Raise your head. Now Krishna does not even say that he is a soul. He says you're a warrior. At the moment, he has not yet moved on to the fact that we are not a body. That is, do your duty. And we often forget who we are. And at this moment, we need someone who will tell us, describe that you are not the one, the state that you represent now. Depressed, tired, sluggish. You're stronger than that. It's as if you're like, well, Krishna himself, he's right at this moment, you hear him, and he says, get up. Get up, I'm with you. Stop it, wipe your snot. Arjuna says, how can I shoot people that I have to read? There is Bhishma, Drona, he even has a cousin Karna there, not, in my opinion, a brother, well, with whom he had to fight. And we are facing situations where we need to act tough in our lives. Yes, we need to make a decision. That is, let's say a conversation with the boss. There's an old friend there, and you don't understand how it's possible to wound someone who is dear to you in quotation marks. Even if he does something wrong, and you have to say sorry, friend, but you understand now the situation is that if you want, I'll tell you. You may not have acted quite correctly in this situation. Or at work, it is necessary to tell the boss something. It is very important. That is, we have shackles. And here is Arjuna. He was a warrior, of course, and he needs to fight. We have our own battlefield Kurukshetra, and Arjuna says it is better to beg than to kill such great people. And even if they behave selfishly, they are still my mentors. How can you enjoy life if it is bought with their blood? That is, Arjuna, he almost broke down. He says, yes, let there be poverty, let there be defeat. But I can't go over the heads of those who are dear to me. He seems to be saying, I can't be happy if I achieve this at the cost of suffering other people. We immediately imagine that this is a warrior. We immediately understand that if he does not do this, he and other people will have problems. That is, if a policeman refuses to fight, then fight, protect, then there will be problems. Yes, of course he thinks it's humane, but it's not always wise. Krishna says it. That is, you need to go through it. And Arjuna says in every text, here in the next one, he says that I don't even know which is better to win or be defeated. They are standing in front of us, we are going to kill them now. And for what to live on. In other words, this is the point of such complete confusion, when it seems to a person that there is no way out. When even a victory seems like a defeat. In other words, everything seems so pointless. Most likely, each of us has been in a situation where it seems the meaninglessness of existence, the meaninglessness of life. You have come to a point where life is meaningless. It feels like I have nothing to live for. And we think, why fight at all? Whether it's a loss or a victory, everything seems terrible. This is a crisis. But the crisis does not mean that you are weak, let's say. This means that your old logic continues to live, it has died, and you need to take a higher view of this situation, of life in general as a whole. And Arjuna says, I do not know what to do. Weakness seized me. I'm asking you to tell me what to do. I'm your student. Arjuna has given up here. He has already stopped giving his logical mindset, his logic. He realized that I couldn't figure it out on my own. And for the first time, he doesn't argue, he doesn't prove, he asks for guidance. He admits that he needs a teacher. This is such a turning point. So you're not trying to cope on your own anymore. You admit, I need guidance, I need help, I need an outside view. This is the power. That is, when we ask a question, we see a difficult situation, we see that I will not solve it, and we surrender to God. We turn inside God's help. I do not know, help me, I do not know how best. We pray to Him before going to bed or during the day, at any time. He says, Arjuna, I do not know how to get rid of grief. Even if I get a whole kingdom, it won't help me, it hurts me, I won't get out of it myself. Arjuna is honest with Krishna. No rewards, victories, money will cure him. He is not looking for consolation. He says, help me to see, to understand. That is, well, in our life, let's say I feel bad inside. For example, a person can speak, think, feel. And I need a way. Not a psychologist there, not a pill, not a move, really the way. Help me, tell me. Because many people think that now I am eating some medicine, I will take something there, and it will become easier for me. You need to see the whole picture. You need to see the spiritual reason why I feel bad, why it's hard for me, why I suffer, why there was a stress situation. Why can't I work at all? Why can't I go to school? And Sanjaya, this man here is a sage who had this vision to see from a distance. He says, he tells the king, that after these words Arjuna fell silent, said, Govinda, I will not fight. That is, he said later that I would not fight after all. Everything, that is, impotence. He dropped his bow, sat down and listened. And Krishna started talking. Sometimes we have to admit that I'm not ready, so to speak, honestly. And Krishna, when he was standing between the two armies, there is such a situation, but that's how it is here in the picture. He smiled at Johnny. He smiled not because he was amused, but because he knows that Arjuna is ready to hear. And it means that Arjun's real awakening is about to begin. When you have become silent, when you have acknowledged your pain, then the answer comes. When you stopped fighting inside, I won't defend myself with my logic, I don't want to, or I will. Well, when you say, I do not know, you start listening, and when you start arguing, saying that this is how it is, then you will not hear anything. He wanted to hear Arjuna. And Krishna says, you talk like a scientist, you try to make arguments, tell why you won't fight, why there will be problems. But you're not really a scientist. You are grieving that you are not worthy of mourning. The wise do not grieve for the living or the dead. This is a major shift. In other words, grief is a sign that we identify ourselves not with the soul, but with the body. Gross physical, subtle mental. We identify with roles, we identify with situations. And Krishna says you are not really suffering. You suffer because of your illusory idea of what life is. That is, when we feel some kind of pain in life, we need to ask the question, who is suffering in me now? The personality, the role that I play in this material world, some of my expectations suffer. Most often, we suffer not from events, but from some images to which we have become attached. And Krishna says that wisdom is to see through it all. And so Arjuna was saying, well, I have to do harm. And Krishna says that there has never been a time when I or all these kings who are gathered here did not exist. And in the future, none of us will cease to exist. That is, Arjuna thinks at the moment as a body that he is going to kill someone there. And Jonah says that Krishna says that we have always existed. I exist and you exist. We are all eternal souls. We were not born and we are not dying. But this does not mean that if we are all eternal, then there is an excuse for inflicting the pain of murder. This means that at the moment it's just that Arjuna is sending himself away with the body and Krishna is trying to shake him up. That is, we are souls, we are individuals, we have been, are and will always be. We will never die, we are eternal in fact. The bodies will die, but we won't. This is knowledge. In other words, you are not a body, you are not a set of emotions, you are not the product of some circumstances, that you found yourself there. You are an eternal soul. You were before this pain, you will be after this pain. And you need to remember that. And if you remember this, it will be easier for you to go through any problems. And then Krishna says that as the soul passes from the body of a child into the body of a young man, then into the body of an old man, and also after death it receives a new body. And a wise man, he does not grieve about it. In other words, Krishna indirectly called Arjuna a fool. Well, he explains that you seem to be saying wise words, but this is not true. That is, every day we look in the mirror, we see that the body is changing and getting older over time. Their gray hair appears, wrinkles appear. And the wise understand this, that the body is the clothes, the soul is the essence. We are eternal. One form has gone, another form will come. One body has gone, another body will come. It's like updating a mobile phone. The old model has already failed. You don't lose yourself, you just like you know how, moved to a new phone case. Simpler, so to speak. And happiness and suffering come and go, like winter and summer, Krishna says. Learn to tolerate them. Everything is simple and clear here. That is, sometimes you are warm, sometimes you are cold. You don't decide not to live because of the bad weather outside. The bad period started there, with Odessa happened. That is, suffering has come, joy has come. It's just a change in the internal climate. The real strength is not to lose yourself either in the heat or in the cold. The driver who is driving on the road, he does not cry from the rain. Oh, and it's raining. It includes wipers. Or he does not laugh, and does not rejoice, and does not laugh from the sun. He's just driving. He has a way, he needs to get there. That is, he is calm in joy, in sorrow. And the one who, Krishna says, that one who is free, for better or for worse, in honor and dishonor, in victory and defeat, is worthy of liberation. That is, we mean joy and sorrow materially. The sun came out, it rained, money appeared there, and all sorts of these material events that relate to the body. It's not like that person, oh, what happiness, the ice cream is delicious there. And rejoices, rejoices. Oh, such happiness, happiness. That is, he is emotionally calm. That is, he understands simply and clearly. In other words, freedom is when it is not so that it is all good in material terms. And when you are stable in any situation, when you have a strong material platform there, this is not freedom. That is, joy does not make you. There is such an expression, intoxicated. That is, intoxicated with joy. In other words, grief should not knock you down. And also joy should not be intoxicating. That's for you. There was no such thing. There is such a word as idle. When a person is idle, that is, he is intoxicated with joy, materially I mean. That is, Krishna says, don't be a slave to your emotions. That is, you need to know how to anchor. There is a storm, A man throws an anchor, and the ship holds. Yes, it does not sail away. Krishna continues that the body is temporary, the soul is eternal, and whoever understands this sees the truth. That is, the body ages, breaks down, dies, the soul does not change. Clothes are torn, we throw these clothes away. But you're not clothes. That is, your essence is deeper. No matter how you are a light bulb, you are a light. That is, it will burn out the light bulb, but it will remain electricity anyway. There is no need to worry much about the light bulbs. Oh my God, the light bulb in my living room burned out. That is, reasonable people understand that we are a soul. That is, but not the soul, as it is sung in the songs. My soul sings and my heart cries. My soul and life will be different. Not my soul, but I have the soul of a Jew. I am a soul, not I have a soul. I am not a physical body. The soul is me. The body, it is doomed to death. The soul is immortal, Krishna says to Arjuna. So fight. It's pointless to hold on to something that will collapse anyway. So don't be afraid, do your duty. The fear of death disappears if you sort of. If you don't send yourself away with the body. It's like being afraid to change the stage of a play, although the play continues there, but as if a person is afraid to move, to change one scene to another. When I was a director, well, I also staged theaters. There are a bunch of scenes. A person has to go out, he has to play his role, go backstage, change clothes, if it's the same actor, and do it in another scene. We need to close this scene first. And Arjuna hears it. Krishna goes on to say that the soul is not born and does not die. It has always been, is and will be. That is, you did not appear with the body, and will not disappear. The driver is driving, he is driving, the car came there, left, but the driver is alive. The car broke down, he changed it, but the driver stayed. And Krishna says that one who knows the nature of the soul cannot kill. Everything is simple and clear. That is, then there will be no fear of death. I remember they told me there was a situation. A woman was dying of cancer, and they sent her these verses from Bhagavad Gita to the hospital by email. She pasted them all over the wall, and it became easier for her. That the soul never dies, it is eternal. It has never been the case that no one existed, we always exist. There is no birth or death for the soul. It has never arisen, does not arise, will not arise. She is unborn, immobile, eternally the same. We've all learned that. When I studied at a yoga center for 4 years, I lived. Here we were learning poetry. Until now, it is very important to remember by heart about the body, about the soul. In other words, this is a doctor, when he performs an operation, he cuts the body, but the person, that is, does not allow the thashushi to get out of the body ahead of time, as if he saves her. That is, old clothes can be exchanged for new ones. Krishna also gives such examples. You don't cry when you change a torn t-shirt. Why grieve when you leave a worn-out body? It's like moving. You're leaving your old apartment for a new apartment. But this is not the end, it's just a change has begun. Then Krishna says that the soul cannot be cut into pieces, burned, that is, it cannot be burned. Soak it with water, it cannot be dried by the wind. It is unchangeable. Nothing material will affect you as a soul, neither bullets, nor atomic bombs, nor storms. She is a soul, that is, we are like a soul, we are outside of it. Then Krishna says that the soul is invisible. Invisible, incomprehensible, so there is no sorrow either. We can feel it. The muscle is the soul. We can be aware of our existence. We can feel. So, I'm sorry, my laptop is running low. I'm going to connect it now. In other words, Krishna says that even if you think that the soul is dying, there is still no reason to grieve. That is, even if so, if death is just a shutdown, then even in this case, there is nothing to be afraid of. In other words, fear has no meaning. And Krishna says, someone who was born will surely die, someone who died will surely be born again. That is, there is no sorrow. Life is a circle. That is, you don't control birth, you don't control death, you can choose how to live. Being afraid of death is like being afraid of the sunset. The sun went down. Like breathing. You inhaled, then exhaled, then inhaled again. And Krishna continues that the living entities, first they were in an unmanifested state, then they manifested, and then they will not manifest again. In other words, there is also a lot of explanation of how the breath of life happens. That is, when Mahavishnu himself inhales, on exhaling, he releases living beings, then inhales again. We are all living with you now on the exhalation of Mahavishnu. That is, this exhalation lasts for a huge number of years. Then we enter it on an inspiration. You know how actors are also an example in the theater. In other words, you are like an actor who went behind the scenes, then went on stage, played a role, then went behind the scenes. But this camera flash, which is coming, it can be so sharp, it just lit you up with this light. So you know how the flash is such that it happens like this. And then, once the clothes appeared somehow hidden, they hide clothes through the light. That is, it's like a flash definitely. Yes, of course. We are not saying that it does not hurt, it hurts, pain is built in here, but there should be no fear. Krishna also continues that the soul is difficult to comprehend. That is, it is considered a miracle. Some people talk about it as a miracle, others consider it a miracle, they have heard about it as a miracle. But few people actually manage to understand it. But knowing about the soul is the key. In other words, few people really want to get this knowledge. Most of them look, listen, but they don't go any deeper. But everyone who studies such topics, they do a great thing. It's like realizing for the first time that I'm not a body, I'm a soul. That is, this moment of awakening begins with this. This is very important. And if, well, as you say, if you know that the soul is eternal, unchangeable, how can you even think about killing someone? That is, Usha, she is immortal. And so for a Kshatriya, Krishna returns to the theme of duty, that for a Kshatriya there is nothing better than fighting for a just cause. That is, for a warrior, this is normal. Well, you have to fight. This is the highest duty, this is his duty. And he reminds us of Arjuna that a warrior must act according to his nature, according to his destiny, not to run away. The teacher must act according to his purpose. He teaches no matter what. Brahman acts like this, Kshatriya acts like this. Vaishya, he sells, he works, he has a gift to sell, a talent. Sudra, he has the gift of working with his hands. And Krishna continues, he inspires Arjuna, he says, happy are those warriors who are given a chance by fate to fight for a just cause. This is the gateway to paradise. In other words, the battle for Arjuna is not a curse, it is a blessing. I don't know if you know it or not, but when a warrior dies on the battlefield for a just cause, he goes to heaven. Well, in this case, not that even in the best case, but he gets to heaven anyway. If he fights and he dies. That is, if it is a spiritual war that is meant. In other words, this is a war for the Dharma. That is, a little different from the wars that we are having now. Although if a person kills there in a war, then there is no karma. Or even now, we don't have one. This is protection. If a robber comes to you, the scriptures say, or a murderer, and you take a knife, and protect your wife and children. Or even a wife protects her children, husband. And she punched this one, she's not carrying a knife wound, she'll kill him, or he will. That is, the husband, let's say, protects his wife, he kills a murderer, a robber. There is absolutely no karma from the point of view of universal laws. That is, if a person went to war to protect women, children, to protect the state, there is no karma. That is, but in our case, as it happens according to material laws, there you still have to prove, of course, that you did it right. So, whose karma is the fault of the aggressors, those who attack? Of course there is. That is, if a person does, he causes pain to other living beings. It's like a thief entered your apartment and was killed. Yes, you came in, you did it, you're following orders. That is, the question of the goal. In other words, why do wars take place at all? For what purpose does a person come to your home, where you live peacefully, calmly, hurt children, shoot at hospitals, in all parks, in other places? You're destroying structures. All of this is immediately karma. In which case it is, of course, a very big topic. What now, Olya? You are asking, and we will also disclose this topic. The topic of the war that is currently underway. And to put it briefly, they used to be on the battlefields of war. Right here. That is, it wasn't in the cities. That is, the person did not come directly to the city. That is, he came to the field, and they sorted things out. But the struggle had to be for religious principles. In other words, it should be for the sake of a spiritual goal, for the sake of spiritual life. And then it was considered correct. But if a person attacks out of some selfish motives and from some incomprehensible other goals that are not connected in any way with spiritual or at all, that is, and he's just trying to offend the sovereign there, to do business there. That is, depending on the goal, then it is. The scriptures say that the king takes a huge amount of the karma of his people, that is, the same way. I mean, well, he's going to suffer a lot. And if he still carries out an order that belongs to the category of ignorance, then this is very harsh karma. In other words, such people suffer very much. So it's all very tough. So, and one more time, a Moscow soldier, pumped up with hive propaganda, is defending my Ukraine. Bona can't opa that I'm such a dropout in her karma. He already, Olya, has karma that he found himself in such a situation that he has to fulfill an order. You will decide what kind of people are in the darkness. Chan with the truth is an aggressor on negative karma. He has such a situation going on. If he is a pilot, let's say he gets on a plane and starts shooting at structures, starts killing people. He destroys residential areas, he kills children, he carries out an order that comes from above, as if under the principle that it is necessary to destroy it. This is karma. That is, the laws of war are written, which should be. When a person simply destroys settlements, when he does not fight as it should be. Here's how it's done separately. That is, he has to kill a soldier, he has to strike, he has to defend his country, as it were, by killing a soldier who, well, is not living areas in this regard. And if there is a situation back that he is following an order, then the lack of karma means not to follow the lead of such a ruler. In other words, he must do everything not to go to this war, if he sees that it is a violation from harm. So yes, if you do, you can even bring it all here a lot. If you follow the order of a person, I'll even tell you this, when a person shouts at you, mocks you at work, well, let's say some boss, he undeservedly does something, well, somehow not that he raises his voice, but makes it so that you are exploited. And you don't say anything, you don't hear God in your heart, what needs to be said, then you deserve to be punished. In other words, you are doing a disservice to a person. Well, how would you do him harm? That is, you need to say Ivan Petrovich there. Why? Well, I'm sorry, of course, I understand you. You're the boss there, and all that. That is, you need to explain it. You need to fight back. Because you have God in your heart, and you don't hear him. And you are on the occasion of your feelings, well, as if not to satisfy. It was like the Second World War, and Roosevelt, the American president, was painted as such as my chicken soul. That is, a chicken soul. That is, he watched like that, he watched, and who wins? There, who wins? Because there were companies like General Motors in America, there were different companies where the Germans just drank tea there. There was business there. And he was afraid in general. He was afraid not to satisfy Hitler. That is, well, as when he looked like that, who wins? Then he will say, let's not let tyranny sneak in. In other words, it is best to have an inner voice and hear it. As far as it is justified to carry out the order. That is, there is a karmic reaction. But the fact that people find themselves in a situation where a person carries out orders that seem to come from above, but they are completely diametrically opposed to spiritual laws, it is better not to do this. It's clear all right. A little bit. What is meant by this and by this? In other words, we should not strive for this. Well, this is me separately for the topic of war. I just wanted to reveal more about the Bhagavad Gita. Because this topic is so sick, in fact, it needs to be analyzed separately, the topic of wars. And then Krishna, he warns that if you back down, you will violate your duty, you will incur shame. In other words, he even speaks the language of Arjuna. That is, for a Kshatriya, the loss of honor is worse than death. That is, both roads are worthy for a warrior, but running away is a disgrace. A shame for years to come. And Krishna speaks even harder. That is, your enemies will laugh at you. Next. That is, if you run away. It is a shame for a Kshatriya to run away. That is, they won't believe in your compassion. They'll think you're just scared. And for a respected person, there is nothing more than shame. And it is necessary to fight. If you perish, there will be a kingdom in heaven. That is, in any case, you will win. And Krishna raises the bar here. He says what to think. In other words, he gives a deeper explanation. And think about the result, about victory, about defeat, happiness, about grief. Just fight for the sake of duty itself. Then you will not incur sin. And he teaches Arjuna to act for the sake of dharma, not for the fruits of his labor. But then Krishna explains that I have been telling you about the nature of the soul, that is, philosophically. And now I'm going to explain about action, like this about the art of service without attachment. That is, he goes on to say forget yoga. In other words, it is when a person consciously acts for God. Not just to fulfill a duty, but to understand the depth of why. And the one who goes this way has one goal. And here is a person who is indecisive, then 1,000 goals, thousands of desires in a person, and the mind becomes clouded. That is, a real person who is looking for, he must be purposeful. The mind of those who are indecisive is multivetvist. And then Krishna goes on to say that most people are fascinated by the beautiful promises of the heavenly life, of wealth. But this path makes it so that a person gets stuck in the material world. Therefore, he advises rise above this. Do not get attached to the duality of happiness, grief, do not get attached to the material. Realize yourself as an eternal soul. And he adds that a small well is useless to someone who has a lake. And like all Vedic rituals, they lose their meaning for one who has understood the supreme meaning, that is, Krishna. The supreme meaning of Vet, God. Therefore, Krishna, he gives practical instructions. In other words, you have the right to act, but you do not have the right to enjoy the fruits of your labor, your actions. In other words, this is karma yoga, which is a very important idea. That is, not to assume that you control the result. But I won't give up for a long time either. That is, do it simply, and then Krishna says that I have already killed them, these warriors. You can just become a weapon in your hands, and that's it. In other words, act without being attached to victory, to defeat. It's all called yoga. That is, they are only misers who strive for the fruits of their labor. In other words, the yogi is real, he acts for the satisfaction of the Lord. When a person works for his own fruits, he is again drawn into the cycle of karma. That is, if you surrender to God, you will work for Him. It does not matter, that is, you are a Sudra, a Kshatriya, a Vaishya. Then you are freed from the consequences of all past actions. Therefore, the answer to your question is what is inside. If you understand that it gives pleasure to God, you know clearly what you are doing. Then there is no karma. And if you understand that it does not please God, then there is karma. It is necessary to find out whether the performance of certain actions will give pleasure to God. And Krishna goes on to give such a rather vivid example. He says that the ocean of the material world becomes for a devotee of God just a puddle from under the hoof of a calf. He describes how insignificant the material world becomes for one who has taken refuge at the lotus feet God. And the mind is cleansed of illusion. When your mind is cleared of illusion, Krishna says, you will become indifferent to karmic chatter, to everything that you have heard before, and will hear again. In other words, a person stops chasing after superficial knowledge, external rituals, and so on. In other words, what is karmic chatter? It means that people are interested in the good and the bad. With good karma, they are afraid of bad karma and, as it were, enjoy good karma. That is, what are people fighting for? To enjoy more. And Krishna says that the flowery language of Vet will stop worrying your mind. Well, when it stops. The Vedas give a lot of everything. When this happens, when you understand the main goal, you will enter into a real spiritual understanding. In other words, you will gain divine consciousness. In other words, true knowledge comes when the soul remembers its nature as an eternal servant of Krishna. And then Arjuna asks the question, and Krishna, how do you know who is worthy of such a state? How does he speak? How does he think? How does he act? And Krishna replies, that one who has cleansed the mind of desires for sense gratification, one who takes joy in spiritual life, and only one has real consciousness. And Krishna, he enumerates the signs of such a person. That is, he is calm. That is, he suffers suffering. He does not light up with delight at this material happiness. He is free from attachments, fear, anger. He is not happy or sad about the events of the outside world. In other words, he owns the senses. He pulls his limbs inside like a turtle when we need it. That is, he uses feelings for their intended purpose. And most people are fascinated by these beautiful promises of the veto of paradise life, about wealth. Arjuna said that there, if I do now, then I won't be able to enjoy. That is, he is afraid of going to hell. Krishna says that this path, the pursuit of material benefits, is the way to continue living in the material world. And Krishna says, rise above it. Don't get attached to the duality of happiness and grief. Be aware of yourself as, realize yourself as an eternal soul. In other words, this is the practical meaning of all this. Okay, well, basically that's it for today. We talked about the second chapter like this. You read, there are a lot of interesting things there, but the whole second chapter is the essence of the Bhagavad Gita. It is called the Bhagavad Review. I recommend that after today's lesson, I will send you the file of the second chapter. You just read it carefully. Carefully, and it will become clearer to you. That is, the comments are very, very deep. So, well, good. We will talk about the topic of wars later. Well, now our task is to reveal the Bhagavad Gita. I will give a separate lecture on the situation with the war. I will reveal it, but it will be later, because it takes up enough time. That's what it's like. We won't be able to pass the Bhagavad Gita then. Therefore, it all echoes. If it's interesting, I can even hold a whole module on the topic of war. That's enough to reveal this topic. And so it's just necessary to understand the essence of the second chapter. Why are we studying it? And the essence of the second chapter is the whole Bhagavad Gita. In it is in the second chapter. And Arjuna asks, Krishna answers. Krishna has revealed everything that needs to be done. And Tanya writes, please choose the internet sign. Kind. I will send you the file now of the second chapter. I'll give you homework. Of course, I would like you to read it all. There are 70 chapters. Oh, with 70 texts. The second chapter is one of the biggest. But when you read it carefully, consciously, think so deeply, you will come very close to understanding the essence of Bhagavad. I highly recommend that after every lecture on Sundays, reread all the chapter we are talking about now. Because I told the essence, I tried to summarize everything in this way, but here's the depth, if you want to think about it deeply enough. Read it, then you really need to study it slowly, calmly, thoughtfully. Here, try reading a week before next Sunday. By the way, have you read the first chapter? Interestingly, here give feedback. I sent you her file. Were you able to read it? In the process? Yes. It's a little heavy, because it's difficult. The first chapter, I mean, because it is difficult to understand who is there, how are the family ties, who is Dhritarashtra, Duryodhana, what kind of king. But still, even if you don't understand everything, you still read. But the second chapter, it's easier in the sense that it just says about the essence that we are not the body, that we are the soul, that we are eternal. That is, well, she is so much more. It's just that the first chapter there are family ties, when you don't know who is who, because there is still such a thing as a vision. When you understand this situation a little bit, you see that there was a king who was really blind. Blind from birth, and blind also spiritually. And he wanted to take over certain territories. That is, he was demonic, and you understand who is who there. Well, you just have to read carefully. So, well, good morning. Okay, then that's it for today. Next time we'll have the next chapter 3. Well, gradually, we will go through all 18 chapters. Good namaste to all. Thank you. See you next week then.